Down for you here with our weekend scoop. Let's get into it. Saturday morning showers should be the only rain this weekend. There is a low risk for a returning shower on Sunday afternoon. Seasonable temperatures throughout the weekend. Highs will be in the low 50s. And go to my website because I have a new story for you here about has it actually been windier lately? The answer, I'm pretty sure, is going to surprise you. You can check it out at cupofjoe.live. Here's a look at our future cast. So we do have these rain showers around until about 12 o'clock, and then we're dry for the rest of our Saturday. We'll see some sunshine as we go into Saturday afternoon as well. Saturday night will be a clear night, and then as we go into Sunday, definitely dry for the morning, but clouds come in during the afternoon. We do get some rain trying to pop up on the future cast. If it rains over you, it's brief, but I think most of us are going to be precipitation free. Remaining precipitation for the weekend, so this is from Saturday morning through the weekend, less than 1/4 of an inch everywhere. Rainfall totals, when you factor in Friday night and what we're going to see this weekend, between 1/4 of an inch to 6/10 of an inch. We can use the rain in some parts of the Jersey Shore, although really most of the Jersey Shore is drought free and not even in abnormally dry conditions. It's really in the western part of the state where we've been drier and we're in that what we call moderate drought. All right, here's a look at our weekend forecast. So once we get past 12 o'clock, we see that sunshine coming out. Overnight low temperatures will be below 32 degrees for Jackson and Tin Falls and Woodbine Township, and then we'll peak in the mid-50s for our Sunday. Over at Avalon, Strathmere, and the Shore, same story with the weather conditions. Temperatures, of course, a little bit milder on our Saturday night. Now we take a look at our travel week. If you're going in or out of New Jersey, good news is no issues really for the next 3 days of our work week. 3 days here, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that is certainly some good news. Let's take a look at our Thanksgiving thoughts. I showed you this on Friday. I'll show you this again here because now we can kind of get a good idea of what I do believe is going to happen. So this is the less likely scenario. It's a warm and wet Thanksgiving where high temperatures get to near 60 degrees, but we do have rain showers around as we are in the midst of a warm front across the Northeast. But here is scenario B, and this looks to be more likely. That warm front would already be gone by the time we get to Thanksgiving morning, and a cold front would pass through the area. We'd probably have a day where temperatures fall as we go into our Thursday. So Thursday morning, your Thanksgiving morning, is going to be warmer than what happens when you're driving home all full from the stuffing and the turkey and the greens and everything on our Thursday night. We take a look at our inland 7-day forecast. Temperatures are going to be in the 50s throughout the next 4 days here. Then we pop in the 60s on Wednesday. Then we get colder as we go into Thanksgiving and Friday. Now, still put some rain in the forecast for Thanksgiving because not completely sold on it being dry just yet, but it is trending that way. Either way, it's definitely getting colder as we go into our Black Friday weekend. Make sure to check out our latest story again, cupofjoe.live. Has it been windier lately? The answer, no. And there's actually more to it. Check it out. We'll see you there. Now, drought. This is interesting because we haven't seen more drought, but we've seen more extreme drought and more extreme wet periods too. This goes back to 1895, and we see a good balance between dry periods and wet periods. However, if you look at the intensity of the reds on the upper part of the chart or the intensity of the blues on the bottom part of the chart, you'll see them getting more intense, those colors, as you go from left to right here, especially with the drought we had in 2024 into early 2025, which prompted a drought warning by the state. They set the policy, and we were in an extreme drought or a level 3 of 4 drought by the United States Drought Monitor. When it comes to precipitation, it looks a little more muddled, a little more hanging around that black line, that 1895 to 2024 average. However, we actually have seen more rainfall in recent decades here across the area. Not by much, but by a noticeable amount still. Snowfall, this is for Newark. And this goes back to the mid-1800s here. We have data back to then, and that's why I'm using this. And you see a long decline downward. In the mid to late 1800s, you could expect about 75% more snow than what we see now in Newark. And this is true for a number of different locations across New Jersey. We have, since 2000, seen a little bit of a gain in snowfall, but the longer-term trend has been less snow. Why is that? Well, because we're seeing heavier snow. We're seeing more snow falling at once. And we're not seeing as much snow, in November or late March, where those snowfall totals are usually less. In other words, when it snows, it really snows. And when it rains, it's been more likely to pour as well. So here's a look at our temperatures for the state of New Jersey throughout its period of record. This goes back to 1895. You see that upward trend, but you see that, hey, compared to this black line, that's the average line, we aren't all that much higher. But that's the 1991 to 2020 average. That's what we as meteorologists say when we're talking about temperatures being above or below average. Hey, this September day is 5 degrees above average. We're referring to the 91 to 2020 climate average. That is re-upped every 10 years, and it goes off a 30-year period. So in 2030, we'll look at a 2001 to 2030 climate average. But look what happens when we look at the entire period of record. Now we see a lot of years that are above this entire period of record average in the past couple of decades. And if you go back to the first 30 years of temperatures here in New Jersey, that average was 50.6. We haven't been there since the mid 1980s. We haven't had a year that would be average for, let's say, 1900 since the mid 1980s here, and we're only getting warmer. So it's important to know your time period because we have different averages based on what you might see. So it's always good when you're looking at something pertaining to climate change, not weather, but climate change, to know what the average time period is. Here's another way of seeing it, and this is from Ed Hawkins' Warming Stripes. Climate Central, which is in Princeton, New Jersey, uses this a lot, and you see more red as you go from left to right on the screen. Not only are we seeing some of our hottest years on record in recent decades, but it's been persistently above average as well. In fact, we don't see a blue on this map, on this chart, on this map until about the year 2000 or so, and that's looking at the entire period of record. So that average is the entire period of record, not the past 30 years. Now, assuming current emissions, where our average temperatures are heading are further south, assuming a moderate emission scenario here, so assuming the way it is, our summers will feel more like Charlottesville, Virginia in 2060, and then Augusta, Georgia by 2100. Again, I'm not saying this is a problem, but I'm just saying that this is what we're seeing. New Jersey is more than double the rate of sea level rise across the globe. We're at 17.6 inches from 1911 to 2019 here. And this chart shows that we're seeing many more times coastal flooding events in Sandy Hook and Atlantic City now than we did in the 1950s and 60s. I mean, it's a multiple of 6 here, the number of coastal flooding events we're seeing now compared to then. We're seeing more properties at risk of flooding. Now, why is that? It's partially due to climate change. It's partially due to that we just have more people along the beaches. Anywhere where you see those oranges are properties newly exposed to flooding since 1985, and that's the majority of properties that are at risk of frequent flooding or annual flooding. We can break this down by county, and Ocean County and Cape May County in particular have seen huge increases in its number of homes that have been built in flood-prone areas since the mid-1980s here. So we're seeing just generally more properties that would flood if there's a hurricane, 62 to 86,000. Again, part of that's climate change and sea level rise. Part of that is just more people at the shore. And homeowners insurance does not cover flood damage from hurricanes. It's important to know that here. So again, this isn't all climate change. We look at the annual sea level rise since 1960 in Atlantic City, and this can be used for most of the Jersey Shore. That is the dashed black line on this chart. It's running on the lower end of all those color lines you see on the chart, the yellows and the reds and the magentas. That means that we're on the lower end of sea level rise projections here. We're still seeing sea level rise, but we're not seeing it at the higher rates. So what is due to climate change? Well, 40% of it, really, it's due to thermal expansion. In other words, as the water heats up, it expands here. We're seeing melting ice sheets and melting glaciers as our climate warms. But 60% of it is not due to climate change in New Jersey. It's due to land sinking, due to the glaciers we used to have in the northern part of the state, which have retreated a long time ago, but we're still seeing the shifting land from that, and other causes for sinking land, mainly the Kirkwood-Cohansey Aquifer being drained out to use for our drinking water and for our farming, which we need here. But if you're in Ocean, Atlantic, or Cape May counties, we're seeing sinking land as that aquifer, that underground pool of water does shrink here and narrow. So there's a multitude of reasons for the sea level rise, and then that parlays into the coastal flooding as well. Yes, we're seeing more coastal flooding. Part of it's due to climate change. Part of it isn't, and part of it's due to man-made causes outside of climate change, such as the fact that most of our beach towns are densely populated with homes and sidewalks and roads, and that water just can't go anywhere. We need to build, and we are, for the most part, building more resilient to get that water out quicker. Here's another look at sea level rise prediction. So the red line is where we are in the 2025. The black dot is about where we are at the sea level rise. Again, on that lower end of the projections. And if you were to take this out to the year 2100, we would be somewhere at about, likely, there's an 83% chance we're at or above 3 feet of sea level rise by 2100. It's as quiet as it could get for fantasy football and weather for this week. We have 7 teams that are playing in either a dome or a retractable roof. That looks to be a record, but I'll leave it up to the Tilt is Real guys to figure that one out. The only game where weather is a little bit of an issue is in Green Bay, and that's because temperatures will be around 32 degrees at kickoff. But it's Green Bay. They can handle it, and they're playing the Vikings, and they can handle that too. So, yeah, there'll be a little more running game and a little favorable defensive attributes during the game, but all in all, it's a pretty quiet week for fantasy football when it comes to the weather. Since the COVID pandemic began in 2020, the question I get asked the most is, Joe, has it been windier lately across the area? And the answer is no. So let's take a look into why this is. This is our annual wind speed at Atlantic City International Airport. Now, year to date, this is through November 17th, we've had a wind speed of 8.72 miles an hour. That's our windiest in about 10 years, but a far cry from where they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We look at this 30-year average also, and there's been a big decline over past decades. And when you look at the days with the average wind over 15 miles an hour, which I would say is a breezy day, we've been seeing that same decline also. So what gives? Well, it could be because in the late 1960s, the weather station at Atlantic City International Airport actually moved from the area on the western side of the airport to the eastern side of the airport, closer to the terminal, where it's pretty much been since then. It's moved around a little bit, but has generally been on that eastern side of the airport. That might have an influence on this. Now, when you take a look at the annual wind speed in the past 30 years, though, you see that there really hasn't been much of a change. It's been fairly consistent, but the number of high wind warnings in New Jersey issued by NOAA has been on the decline. And when you look at the wind advisories, which are nuisance level winds, well, that's also been steady throughout the past 30 years or so, with a big drop around 2015. So when you take a look at this, we really have seen just winds that have been consistently blowing at the same rate over the past 30 years, and in a longer period of record have seen a decline. Now, part of that is explained due to the fact that the weather station has changed positions at Atlantic City International Airport, but that doesn't explain the consistent winds more or less over the past 30 years or so. So, no, it hasn't gotten windier in recent years. Our perception doesn't equal reality. However, I think because we're just outside more in the wake since the COVID pandemic, maybe we're noticing the rustling of the leaves and the trees more throughout the year when we're outside. Now, hurricanes is kind of split. We are seeing more major hurricanes, category 3, 4, or 5 hurricanes, and more rapidly intensifying hurricanes, which means at least 35 mile an hour increase within 24 hours. And on those extreme rapid intensifications, at least 58 miles an hour increase in 24 hours, we're seeing that increase there too. Now, what we're not seeing are just more tropical cyclones and hurricanes. We've been pretty consistent. Now, what you're seeing on this chart here on the lower right in the red is the number of landfalling hurricanes. That's been about consistent, about 2 a year. Now, what you're seeing in the green and the orange are the total number of hurricanes. The orange line is adjusted for the what we call pre-satellite era. So from 1859 or 1860, I should say, until the mid 1960s, we didn't have satellites in the sky to see, a hurricane that might just be small in the open Atlantic, and there's no boats going past there. Of course, now we can see that with satellite. That yellow line, that orange line, adjusts for it. And we really haven't seen much of an increase. So you have to look at the adjusted line from 1860 until it ends about 1965, 1970 or so, and then look at the green line, and you see we don't have much of a change. From college essays to graduate statements to career transitions, Jennifer Ansbach Coaching helps every learner take the next step with confidence. Whether you're a high school senior preparing for college, a graduate school applicant, or returning to school after time away, your words can open doors. Write, revise, rise. Visit JenniferAnsbach.com to get started. That's Jennifer, ANSBACH.com.
Welcome to your Jersey Shore 24/7 live streaming weather channel. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Our team at Cup of Joe Weather and Drone is covering the shore like nowhere else. And this live streaming weather channel is one more reason why. In the main player, get all of our weather and drone videos. On the left-hand side, see current radar, see our webcams across the Jersey Shore, and even giving you the ability to submit your photos to live on the live streaming channel. On the bottom, we have our tickers for weather and future weather conditions on both land and sea. And of course, all the ways to follow Cup of Joe Weather and Drone.
Increase in 24 hours, we're seeing that increase there too. Now, what we're not seeing are just more tropical cyclones and hurricanes. We've been pretty consistent. Now, what you're seeing on this chart here on the lower right in the red is the number of landfalling hurricanes. That's been about consistent, about 2 a year.